pandemic of violence floods the streets of major cities as cases of the media-dubbed murder virus, MV20, soar, causing those infected to go on killing sprees. Caught in the middle, police detective Angela Miller finds her only trustworthy ally in the self-proclaimed psychic PI, Gerald Henry. As the two try to navigate the violence, they are drawn into New Age guru Abramelin Harvest's plot to heal the planet. Harvest's missive:
the world is sick, and humanity is the infection.
The cure: murder. From the twisted mind of Shawn C. Baker, author of A Collection of Desires and Shadow Play in Book 1, Kim and Jesse, comes his most vicious novel yet, Murder Virus. Available where books are sold.
Hello, welcome to another episode of the Horror Vision Presents Sticks and Stones, a discussion on folk horror. I'm Shawn Charles Baker.
I'm Raymond Vance Laragodi. I guess we're gonna go.
Dude, you got a badass middle name, man. You should just go by Vance. Vance sounds like somebody that's gonna pull a fucking butterfly knife and stab. Not even kidding.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, you're like, oh, that's a compliment. Thank you. I sound like a psycho. Cool.
I don't know. It oddly fits for this podcast. You know what I'm saying?
Well, for the listeners, Ray has left a wake of stabbings in his past. So, and I don't think it was with a butterfly knife. I think you used a switchblade. But
yeah,
hey,
we don't want to talk about that.
yeah, that's true. Yeah. As your lawyer, I advise you to not discuss it any further. I'll edit this out. Okay. Anyway, so we're back to talk about some more folk horror. We're going to stay with we're kind of using Kier-La Janice's Woodlands Dark and Days Bewitched documentary, which recently Severin Films put out, and it's streaming on Shudder. We're kind of using that to talk about this stuff. So we're staying with the what they would call the Call Me From the Valley, the American folk horror chapter in that documentary. But we're shifting into a very, very much more modern
yes, absolutely.
era. And so, Ray, what are the films we're going to talk about today?
So I suggested that we check out Jug Face and Children of the Corn, the original back from the 80s. And primarily I thought of that because it's not that they're similar in their structure. It's more a similarity in the whole thing of it seems to be about a group of people that are being led by some kind of entity existing in this location that they all consider a sacred spot for the children in the town of
Gatlin.
Totally blanking. Gatlin, thank you. I was trying to remember it. It's the corn, and
it's He Who Walks Behind the Rose.
Yes. And
ROWS, not ROSE. Totally different movie. I think that's a porno.
Exactly. But in the Appalachian town, in this Appalachian Valley that these people all live in, it's this pit.
In Jug Face, yeah.
In Jug Face. And they don't actually see whatever is out there. Let me put it this way. They don't actually see whatever's out there. And if you do see whatever's out there, you're probably dead. So you can't explain what you get to see afterward. What's nice is that there is definitely things in these locations. There is an implementation at some point in Children of the Corn, which one of the things that like frustrated me when I don't know about you, but when I watched the film, that when it first starts, there's the one child that is trying to escape the town, what I mean by first starts after they have the whole setup of all the children of the town killed the parents and there's no longer adults, that one of the children decides, I'm gonna escape, and he's happened upon by Malachi, who kills him in the cornfield and then leaves his body out in the road, and which is hit by the two adults that end up coming into the town.
Mhm.
And that scene made me wonder, like, kind of sets up to me like, oh, maybe it's just Malachi and Isaac who are, for lack of a better term, just insane, just madmen. And they've decided to create their own cult and lead these children into violence. But as the film progresses, there is things that happen and things that can't be explained, and the only explanation seems to be there is indeed some kind of entity out there. It is a little bit frustrating that it kind of seems to play with it, that maybe it's just the children are nuts. But but on the other side, the one thing I like about Jug Face is that it kind of establishes right from the start that there is definitely something out there. There is something in this pit, and there is no explanation of what the creature in the pit is, and there is only an offering of a clue by a ghost at one point in the film who says it's not of this world.
Mm-hmm.
But that's it. One thing I don't know about you. I don't know. We'll talk about it more as we go into the film. But I absolutely love my comparison of how Children of Corn has that whole setup where the kid is telling the story, and his sister starts drawing the pictures, and she's sick at home, and all the kids get killed. All the kids start murdering the adults, and he witnesses it in the coffee shop. By comparison, I love the way it's done in Jug Face with this these drawings, art pieces that set up like there was this town, there were a group of people that were settled there. They were probably Appalachians, back in probably about a couple hundred years ago. They were in this town all by themselves. They were Christians. They went to church. People started getting sick. They couldn't get better, and children started falling ill, and the parent and the adults didn't know what to do. One guy had a vision. The pit told him to bring to take mud from it, and it would make a jug, and the jug would have the face of a person that needed to be sacrificed. And he took the priest and convinced everyone else to go there. And after they washed the children in the mud, the children got better. And they were like, well, we got to sacrifice the priest now.
Yeah.
So the way that the thing establishes, you got to get rid of this guy because he's in my way. So now you're under my control. I was like, that's so, I don't know, for some reason to me, it felt so much more satisfying than the whole child telling the backstory in Children of the Corn.
Oh, totally. Okay, so, I mean, we'll just get this out of the way. First of all, we're gonna go spoilers. I don't think anybody gives a shit about spoilers for Children of the Corn.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen Jug Face, turn this off now because we're just gonna talk about it. I don't feel like it's not like The Sixth Sense or something like that. I don't know that it can actually be spoiled, but we're gonna go all out. So that being said,
and if you've watched it, go watch it. It's great.
Yeah,
it's a great little.
Larry Fessenden has one of the starring roles, so that's always a good thing.
Exactly.
So Children of the Corn is just not a good movie.
No, it's not.
It's just not. I mean, so it's from 1984. Now, the funny thing, though, is I saw that movie, the last time I saw that movie, before 3 days ago, was when it first was on either cable or VHS in probably 85. It came out in 84. I'm going to guess 85.
Wow.
So I was young, and the opening slaughter of the adults, which I hate even saying slaughter because in my memory, it was always like, oh, they slaughter the adults. And you see it now and every fucking death is off screen. And it's not even it's the thing where I remembered so vividly that whole scene. And like I've said on here before, I often don't remember things, but it was so in my head. I don't remember that it scared me, but it was in my head. And to this day, the scene where I remembered it being, they put somebody's hand in a blender, but it was actually the meat slicer that Kirsten pointed out is just literally on the counter close enough for any child patron to just stand up and get their hand caught in, but whatever.
Yeah.
But I remembered it so vividly, but it's it's even not only do they not show that, but it's like that thing where like they show the hand going toward it, and then the camera like cuts real quick, like to the side, and the blood like hits the kid's face, and it's just cheesy. It's cheesy. And in an era where like there were video nasties and stuff, I can see what they were going for. Like, dude, you could see that movie borrowing from Carpenter, The Omen, slashers. There were a couple scenes early on, especially with the the half man, like the old man that they left alive to like give him gasoline, and when he gets picked off, where it's like the POV of the killer, right? So I'm like, oh god, absolutely. Like that was all the rage in 1984. They're basically borrowing from all this stuff, and it's an era where there's all this like this huge horror boom and video nasties, and they just don't want to do it. They want the cake and eat it too, right? They wanted to
you can tell it was a big budget. You can tell it was a mainstream.
Well, you can't tell it was a big budget. You can tell it was a mainstream.
I don't think it was a big. I'm sorry.
I meant say that was a big budget.
Forgive me. I meant mainstream. It was a mainstream horror movie.
No, I know.
And it has the trappings of a mainstream horror movie, including the thing of in the end of. I don't know. Maybe I feel like the ending there would have been a time in my life that the ending would have satisfied me, but I have reached this point where I've watched so much horror now that it's bothersome to have this ending where like there's this entity, there's a demon that literally is living in this cornfield. It was able to possess a child of telling it to kill all the adults and everything. And the worst thing that can happen to it is you douse it in fire. And I was
and it's such a protracted scene too. It's just like, we need another coupling. Quick, find it. It's like
it's a protracted scene. It's the adult has to be the one that does it.
And he's terrible. I'm sorry, but Peter Horton is Bert. I'm not saying it's Peter Horton's fault. I'm sure he's a fine actor. I know I've seen him other stuff. I couldn't tell you what, but this movie, like I know he like
the other thing that I know him from in the 80s is Side Out, which isn't the best movie of all time. It's Cheese Deluxe as well. So it's got to be better than that. No, so okay, the short story, which is in Stephen King's The Night Shift, right? So that like the couple, Vicky and Bert. Vicky's played by Linda Hamilton in her pre-badass. It's like, and it's funny because this came out the same year as the first Terminator, and she wasn't a badass in the first Terminator. It's not till that second one in the early 90s where she shows up and she's obviously been doing pull-ups and push-ups but look up her IMDb picture. She looks like she's a cop in the SWAT team about to go storm a fucking drug den. It's hysterical. But so she hadn't like arrived into her niche in film, right? But so anyway, so Bert and Vicky in the story, they're like on this road trip across country to visit family in California, trying to save their marriage, and they hate one another. I mean, the whole crux of the story is she keeps saying like, dude, we need to get the fuck out of here. It's the exact same setup and everything. It's very similar, but then it just happens more like in quicker beats where they're driving around Gatling. They don't try to go to the other town, and it does that mouth of madness thing where they keep ending up back in the same spot or whatever. And she's like, we have to go. This is, something is wrong. And there's even a part where he goes into the church right before all the shit goes down. And he's like, this is fucked up. We need to get out of here. And then a voice in his head is like, but I want to let her kind of like twist in the wind a little bit first. And then later he's like, if I had just listened to her. So but my point being, in the film, I can see that they're playing her as kind of like lively, and him as kind of, he's supposed to be this like, I've just got this internship and I'm a doctor and I'm very serious. And so he's kind of, but they have like, Crouchy.
There's no chemistry between the two of them.
No.
Even in a situation like that where one character is like kind of lively and the other one isn't, and the lively one's trying to draw them into their web, it still should play out differently. He felt like, again, I'm not saying it's his fault. Might have been the script, might have been the direction. I don't know. Might have been his fault. It just sucks. It's like, buddy, like, Malachi, cut this dude's throat and get on with it, and let's, move on. It takes the whole movie down for me in a lot of ways, because it could just be something. There's so much opportunity. Anyway, we don't necessarily want to overly critique it. I'm sorry. I felt like
I get it because I mean besides the whole thing of like how easy it is actually to get rid of the monster, the other thing that bothers me is another, like, it has all the trappings of a mainstream horror movie. It does a lot of time wasting. Like the story is actually, if it were told by a more skilled horror, director, it does a lot of time wasting. It does a lot of like, those moments that you're talking about. A lot of like, just follow around for noises, or there's a knife and it's coming at it's, there's the character and then there's the knife and then there's the character and then there's a knife, and like you're like, I don't know, there's something about it, like they're trying to create tension
and it doesn't work. That's exactly what it is. They're trying to create tension.
Yeah, it
where
doesn't
there is
work.
none.
And as a when you watch too much horror, like you've seen it done better, and you're just like, just kill him. I know what's coming. Stop wasting my time.
I mean, and maybe at the time, like even at that time, audiences wouldn't necessarily have been that experienced to think that, but I still think in 1984 it would have still appeared to be wasting its fucking time, right?
I feel like it.
Hey, fuck both of us, because it's got how many fucking direct-to-video sequels? I mean, I think like 8 or something. It's insane. I've never seen any of them. I don't ever intend to. So
I haven't either.
But as far as the folk horror tradition here, one of the things I wanted to point out also, a difference. So in the movie, we're seeing this town under Isaac's tutelage. They kill all the adults, right? But in the book, so it's a short story that was originally published in the late 70s in a magazine before Stephen King started, being published in anthologies and then, later his own books. So it was published in the late 70s. And so they're referencing, when they go into the bar and grill, there's a calendar on the wall that says 1964. So the idea that Vicky and Bert have is like, has nothing, like, did whatever happened here happen 12 years ago? So, okay, so it's 1976 when it takes place. And they reference at the end of the story, after the adults are dispatched, there's a segment where, so I'm just going to read briefly to set this up. The children, quote, the children of the corn stood in the clearing at midday looking at the 2 crucified skeletons and the 2 bodies. The bodies were not skeletons yet, but they would be in time. And here in the heartland of Nebraska, in the corn, there was nothing but time. Behold, a dream came to me in the night, and the Lord did show all of this to me. They all turned to look at Isaac with dread and wonder, even Malachi. Isaac was only 9, but he had been the seer since the corn had taken David a year ago. David had been 19, and he had walked into the corn on his birthday just as dusk had come drifting down the summer rose. End quote. So the point being, this town had been this way since the early to mid 60s, and Isaac was not the first seer. It is something that was passed down to him. And this then is the parallel, I think, to Jug Face, where in Jug Face, Shawn Bridgers is, they don't call him the seer. I forget what they call him, but he's the one that gathers the mud and makes the Jug Face, which then, elicits whoever is sacrificed, right? So it's this idea of, and I think this is something you see in a lot of folk horror and just in mythology in general, where you have a shamanic person within the community, and that role is passed down, right? So it's something like whatever the entity is chooses somebody to replace, okay, this person is no longer the seer or the pottery person, whatever they call them.
Yeah.
Now it's going to pass this other person. And Jug Face, so obviously the movie eschews that completely with Children of the Corn, where Jug Face really leans into that, because they play with Shawn Bridgers' character and his position in the community. The whole plot hinges around it, right?
Well, you have this, it's interesting because I forget what his name of his character was, but
Dewey.
Dewey.
Great character names in Jug Face. Every character name is amazing.
They are amazing names, aren't they? Oh my god. But Dewey is, you would think because he's so important and because he has this ability and that like it would make him
make his word count
some,
for something.
well, like someone sacred, someone more
Yeah.
important in the community, but instead he's kind of a pariah.
Yeah.
He's an outsider. Only the main character. I'm totally blanking on everyone's name right now. I can only remember the brother's name, just to be. No, the girl,
Oh, okay.
the main girl.
Oh,
totally
Ada.
her name.
She's got the only
Ada.
normal name in the entire community.
Yeah. But you have only Ada seems to be this person who goes out and visits him and interacts with him and like actually kind of is a friend to him. Everyone else is kind of like, the brother literally calls him a retard. You know, and it's crazy because like he's the one that once he goes into these trances, he's the one that makes these jugs, and then it gets decided as, okay, that's the next person to sacrifice. That's what the pit wants. It feels a little bit more like Fessenden's character at times has more of the leader, almost preacher to the pit kind of thing, so that like the person who gets chosen as the I guess you could say the vessel is just a vessel, and they don't look to that person for any kind of qualities of leadership. It's just like, oh, you poor bastard, you're the one that has to makes the jugs, so good luck to you. And instead another leader is kind of chosen, anointed, and it the explanation isn't like in children, it's that he who walks behind the rose is talking to Isaac, and then Malachi claims that he can take possession of leadership, and then we see that Isaac returns from the dead and tells him like, no, he wants you too, and he literally kills him by breaking his neck.
Probably the only good scene in the whole movie. Probably.
Yeah, that's a pretty awesome scene, isn't it?
He wants you too,
Malachi. And then that's probably the most quoted scene. Probably one of the most quoted lines too.
Man, can you imagine if we had a friend named Malachi? That's like all he,
oh my God.
It's all the. Well, I saw, guys, come on, knock it off.
I saw a thing with that actor like years ago where he was interviewed. He was in some movie, and they were talking to him, and they were like, "Oh man, you're like it's amazing you're here, and like you're, it's great to have you in this movie." And they asked him like, "But what?" And they're like, "Hey, but what kind of lasting effect has it been? Have you had in your career playing Malachi?" And he's like, the one thing I can tell you is that ever since I played that role, I will be out in public and I will just randomly suddenly hear, "He wants you too, Malachi," just screamed at me from somewhere out of nowhere. He's like, I'll just be somewhere and someone will just scream that at me as like showing that they're a fan. Like, oh man, it's Malachi. I got to say that to him. But like, he's like, it's weird. It's honestly like the one thing that people always say to me. Like, I'm like, oh geez.
You know what's hysterical?
Like that would be a little bit trying after a while.
So the actor's name is Courtney Gaines, and I didn't even realize this. He's in one of my favorite movies, and I didn't realize he's in The Burbs. He's Hans.
Oh yeah.
Came with the frame.
It came with the frame.
So if I ever run into him, I'm not going to say he wants you too, Malachi. I'll be like,
it came with the frame. You can just say that to him.
Yeah.
But
oh my God. Hans Christian Andersen. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Yes, I get it. Not a problem.
No, anyway,
I enjoyed that movie quite a bit too. But in that community, like it seems to be someone who has strength is the person that gets chosen and gets the lead. I don't know. Jug Face is just it's so much more of a better film. It has an excellent setup. The main character being Ada is troublesome because when the movie starts, you're just like, oh, okay, here's just this young girl. Oh, okay, she's interested in this guy. It betrays you because you're sitting there and like, I don't know about you, I felt a little bit betrayed because and I'll explain, because I seen her before in Darling. And
Oh,
she's
dude,
a fantastic
she's
actress.
great. She's in Mind's Eye. Lauren Ashley Carter.
Oh,
Lauren Ashley
yes.
Carter. She's fantastic. Great actress.
She's fantastic. She's pretty. And like 5 minutes into Jug Face, you get a sex scene, and you're like, all right, hot. And then the movie betrays you because you find out like 5-10 minutes later the dude she was having sex with is her brother in the movie.
Yeah,
and you're
totally.
like,
That's
oh no.
yeah. Now you feel like
that's what I got turned on by. Oh no. Ew.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to go shower.
But it takes longer. It actually takes longer. So you get that scene almost right away. And like you said, it's got to be like 5-10 minutes in. And then it goes into the thing where they're like, oh, she's like being betrothed or whatever they call it to the other guy. And then you're like, oh shit, okay, so I see where this is kind of going, right? So this is that classic story of, you know, she's got to marry this guy, but she loves this guy. And it's like, no, it's your brother.
Oh, you didn't pick that? Oh, I picked it up like when she showed up. Maybe it was during the dinner. I think you're right. It was during the dinner.
Sooner, but I feel like
it was during the dinner.
Time.
Like it did take a little bit of its time, and then it made you it kind of betrayed you because then you were like, because then at that point you'd seen her steal the Jug Face too, so she'd hidden her own, like she's trying to get out of her own death, and then I realized like, oh my god, she's doing her brother. So
and there's a scene later where she says, I loved him.
It does this weird thing where after a while, the piling up of the bodies of the other people because she has stolen a jug, and also her intentionally hiding the Jug Face, knowing that all of these other people are dying because of what she's done, it makes you feel like she's wrong. It kind of makes you turn on her. Like, I don't know about you, but I felt psychologically a little bit like I turned on her. Like, I was like, ooh.
But then she atones for it eventually.
She does, but
you know, like, I mean, I give her character credit because she doesn't even she has an opportunity to abscond again, and she's like, no, you know what, fuck it, I'm staying here, I'm taking my medicine.
Got it.
So she, you know, I mean, obviously it's the whole thing is, well, I mean, I was going to say it's ludicrous, but I mean, it's not, because it obviously is working. There is something going on. So I like that they don't really answer that. So one of the things I was going to say, what you were saying about the fact that in that community, that position that Shawn Bridgers Dewey, the kind of shamanic position, is kind of shunned. And not really well respected, is interesting. And do you think the difference here is that, okay, look, Children of the Corn, where Isaac is the shaman and he's respected, right? And then in Jug Face, Dewey is not. Well, in Children of the Corn, you have a modern setting where the characters have gone back to old ways. And so then that elevates the position of the seer, right? But the thing about Jug Face that surprises me, so it's this Appalachian, like kind of backwoods kind of deal, right? But at some point I'm like, wait a minute. Like they have fairly modern conveniences. Like the grandfather, even though he shits in a bucket, he lives in like an RV. And then like Fessenden, his house, you know, the family's house is like, it's a fairly modern looking house when you're inside of it. So it's almost like they're kind of keeping up with things, but not with their like religious. And so that would make sense with the pictures at the beginning kind of giving the story like this, you know, this was a normal society until this particular incident happened. And because of their isolation, they're able to kind of like, kind of balance on this line between being a modern society, but with these old ways. And so the seer, and also he would be an outcast because he's basically, I mean, the Children of the Corn, they're just like, kill the outsiders, kill the parents when you're 19, walk into the corn. And it seems to be, you walk into the corn and you're gone. It's not like they see you getting torn to shreds and they know that's what's going to happen to me. Whereas in Jug Face, like Dewey's seeing is directly responsible for like fathers having to watch somebody cut their son's throat, right? So he would be despised, even though it's like, we have to do this, but we don't really want. That's a weird line that the community balances on.
It is a weird line. It's a weird line. You're right, because I mean, there's a thing of you're right. They do have some modern conveniences, but the thing is that they have to stay. Their community has to stay close to that pit, so they can't venture out.
Yeah.
And because of that, they're limited by locality. Like, you know, unless like the modern world comes out that way. But then again, if the modern world comes out that way, I would feel like the modern world would either try to take away the pit or cover it up or change or convince them that they're wrong in what they're following, and they don't want to. They don't want it. They don't want that. They like the pit. They like that it gives, like, whatever gifts it gives them. It's not so much of a trapping in, like, because that's the other thing too. And in Children of the Corn, they're it's like yes, Isaac's a leader and Malachi is a second lieutenant, but they're somewhat trapped. Like, they can't escape that. They can't leave it, even if they want to willingly. Whereas these people, they want to stay there. They like this life that they're living. They like the place that they're living. The only person that does suggest leaving at one point is Ada, but that's only because she knows she needs to be sacrificed. So it's you would get the idea that, like, she'd probably be okay with staying if it wasn't for that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
I don't know. Like,
it's really interesting. It's an interesting.
It is interesting. Yeah. I mean, the one thing I think that is fascinating is they both are kind of interesting critiques on religion, and you know, Children of the Corn. One of the things that I find fascinating, and I would really like to pick apart King's brain, because I know it was there in the original story, is it just the adaptation, like I was discussing with you at one point? Like, is it just Isaac being smart and deciding, much like the Catholic Church did in parts of the world, of when they went there, they would adapt part of their religion that was there, and say, okay, like Christmas is part of, like, is based in paganism, and as well as Easter and like Santorini and things like that. These are based in outside religions, and the way to win people over was to say, oh, okay, no, we've got this, and that's like that. See, you should be part of the church. And I'm wondering if, like, part of the way that he won over these kids is by taking the iconography of the cross and then making these crosses out of corn that exist in that.
That's interesting.
And Jug Face is a separation of, like, oh no, they got rid of the entity, got rid of the church, got rid of the pastor. But I mean, still, there seems to be a critique on the concept of a creator, and there being something out there, and it wanting a gift for what it gives back. It now wants something back. It wants a life.
That's interesting in that. So in Jug Face, there's a direct correlation. Like, you were sick, I healed you. If you get sick, I will heal you, but you have to give me what I want, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But in Children of the Corn, there's none of that. Like, it's not even a creator myth. It's really just so. And here's a big difference, but it's very finely kind of demarcated between the story and the movie, where since the movie, all these events, it's like they happen in short order from, as far as we know, Isaac, and the children take over the town, and then Bert and Vicky show up. So it's not like it's been 12 years like in the story. So what is in the movie, what would be the end result? Like, if
I think at the beginning of the movie, it says something like 3 months ago, or maybe
I think you're right.
It must be 3 months. I think it's 3 months.
On a long enough timeline.
But it's still a short timeline.
On a long enough timeline. So what exactly happened? So if anybody, as an adult that comes into town, they'll kill them. And then so I don't think they do this. And I don't know if they mentioned this in the book. I'm sorry, in the movie, because I watched the movie a couple days ago. I read the story over the last 24 hours. I had read it previously, but not for years.
Well,
But
let me know and I'll tell you.
In the story, when you're 19, you walk into the corn because now you're an adult. So you can't be there anymore. So really the entity, he who walks behind the rose, just doesn't want adults there, but he doesn't claim to, or it doesn't claim to be a creator. It's not healing anybody. It's just basically like, give me the sacrifice. And that's it. It looks like in the movie, where in the story, there's like a pregnant chick. So they are, and so the like kind of the crux of the story is the fact that at the end, he who walks behind the rose is not happy with the sacrifice they've given them. So he changes. They say the age of favor has now been lowered from 19 to 18. And so then everybody looks at Malachi and this other kid because they're 18. So they have to leave. And Malachi's like, I obey. But, and this girl who has Malachi, it says she's carrying Malachi's child, watches him walk away or whatever. So they're propagating. So it is like something that is going to be sustainable because there are births. But in the movie, there's not going to be any chance of that because like Malachi, there might be a couple on the verge of adulthood that could procreate, but for the most part, it's little kids. So like
it's little kids, and I don't remember there being any suggestion of needing to procreate.
I mean, I know like in It, there's like a little kid gangbang or whatever in the novel. So I don't know if there's like something was like that is like the deleted scene from the story or what, but no, but it's just it's a small distinction between the two.
In the movie, there's no reference, so it does seem like it would be a non-sustainable community. Yeah, like how do you keep going?
And I think there is that intimation of the 19 is the age out in the movie, because I'm remembering now in the short story he actually finds, when he goes into the church, he finds a ledger and it lists all these people and their birth date and then another date, and it's all 19 years, right? So in other words, it's recording this person was born on this date and like left or died on this date or whatever. So I think there was a similar scene with a ledger in the movie, but I can't remember. Was there? Like some scene where he stumbled across something that had dates or something, or no, am I wrong? Guy obviously didn't leave much of an impression on me this time, because it's like
there was something about a Bible, and like when he walks into the church, there's all the stuff on the wall. I feel like he walks in when they're gonna. No, I feel like what it is there's a scene where he walks in and he sees. I forget the name of the actor, but there's a kid who's gonna age out, and so they're carving a cross on his chest.
Yes,
and they're supposed to sacrifice him.
That is there,
and
yes,
they're
definitely.
like, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And they're like, he's like, "I'm too old. I have to. This is my time." That's
right, Amos. I think the character's Amos, and so that see, look, that like I was struggling. I didn't even remember that. And I just watched it a couple days ago. Yeah. So it is the same thing. It ages out. There's a great scene in the story where when Bert first walks into the church, like there's still been no sign of anybody. And there's this whole thing where it's like the description, it's like, okay, I'm going to quote again. The space behind the pulpit was dominated by a gigantic portrait of Christ. And Bert thought, if nothing else in this town gave Vicky the screaming Mimis, this would. The Christ was grinning, vulpine. His eyes were wide and staring, reminding Bert uneasily of Lon Chaney in The Phantom of the Opera. In each of the wide black pupils, someone, a sinner presumably, was drowning in a lake of fire. But the oddest thing was that this Christ had green hair which on closer examination revealed itself to be the twinning mass of early summer corn. The picture was crudely done but effective. It looked like a comic strip mural done by a gifted child, an Old Testament Christ or a pagan Christ that might slaughter his sheep for sacrifice instead of leading them. So that's, to me, that right there is like the fucking money shot in the story. I loved that description.
I think I get that. I think the one thing that might be there, the car ride when they turn on the radio and there's the guy who's like, there's a place there is a place in hell for homosexuals and drug takers and all these different people. And like they start mocking it, but and they get annoyed because it's also the only thing they can find on the radio.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that you can draw from that scene is that if that's on the radio and there's no music playing and the kids, and so if the kids have been exposed to that and it's the choice between this church that suggests that everything is a sin and everyone is going to hell, and nothing is allowed, and some monstrous creature that lives in their cornfield and is demanding them to kill all the adults, and then they're given this leader who doesn't want them to do anything except for presumably worship this deity, because that's one of the things in the story, in like the movie, is that they don't like there's the two kids who don't want to follow along, and they like to listen to music, they like to play like kids like to play, and that's a sin. They're not supposed to do that. They're not supposed to draw.
Right.
They're just
that's right.
Like they're just supposed to, I guess, sit around and like worship this thing. And there is and I guess by comparison, the other option they had was go to a church that their parents were all going to take them to, where they got to hear about how all the sinners were going to burn in hell. So I guess that kind of explains how they could be taken in by this person and taken in by this entity, because everything was brimstone and fire, and like if it's brimstone and fire versus a deity who just wants you to kill all the adults and worship it doesn't seem all that dissimilar. It doesn't seem, and maybe you even think like, well, I'm just carrying out the Lord's work. I'm just getting rid of the sinners.
I think I really like that. I think you hit it on the head. And also I feel like, I don't know if this is intended or not. I pick up this. Let me ask you if you pick this up. There's a reference that Isaac had like recently come to the community, and then this happened, right? Like, because it's like, oh, if only he had never come here.
Something like that, yeah.
So that makes me wonder, is he from another, and maybe, I don't know, maybe the sequel's going to this. I'm not wondering enough to even, to look into it, but and watch them. But like, is he an offshoot from another sect of this somewhere else? But I mean, you're definitely right. And so the preacher on the radio, that's an interesting point, and why I think you're right, because it's a change from the short story, and I think they changed it probably smartly so to set up exactly what you're saying, whereas in the short story it's Isaac's voice on the radio. They don't outright say that, but when Vicky and Bert hear it on the radio, they're like, one of them says, doesn't it preacher sound kind of young to you? So really? So it's totally supposed to be the kids. So I mean, that was a difference I noticed, and I think it's like you said, they changed it for the movie to be just some random asshole, fire and brimstone preacher. Because that's like, so that's their idea of what religion is, and so this guy shows up and offers them this radicalized, it basically weaponizes them, right? So, as religion often does to susceptible people. So I don't know. I mean, I would definitely say out of the two, I really liked Jug Face. Chad Crawford Kinkle is the writer director, and he also did a movie I saw last year or maybe 2 years ago when it first came out, called Dementor. I was like so psyched for this movie. I
need to see Dementor.
It's good. I got to see it again. I ran into it with open arms. Like I downloaded it, or I mean, I rented it on Prime the day it dropped, because it definitely has some like Gummo comparisons, and I love Gummo.
Ooh.
But it didn't work for me so much. But I remember thinking like, maybe it's because I had different expectations. So now I've seen Jug Face and really liked it. I'd like to go back and watch it again. But he's a definitely very interesting voice. And I can't, there's nothing listed as upcoming projects on IMDb. So I just hope that, he's one of those guys that's kind of in that Glass Eye Picks Fessenden, you know, extended family, I think. So, and the cast of both movies kind of bears that out. So, did you have any closing thoughts on either of these movies?
Well, I'm in agreement with you. Like Children of Corn, I didn't see it until I saw it as an adult, and I thought, oh, this is so underwhelming. And then Jug Face, I saw probably last year, and I think I talked about it on the regular podcast, but I really liked it. I was really surprised by it. Just this neat little niche of Appalachian horror. And
which is always cool.
And what I liked about it was that it felt so original. It didn't feel like, it wasn't like some killer. It wasn't some slasher in the hills, or or like or something like a version of like either I'll Spit on Your Grave, which is a little bit Appalachian, and that other one, the big budget one, Deliverance. It wasn't like something like that. It was instead more about this entity and about like more of a demonic, and not demonic, but like some kind of evil entity and a little bit of a ghost story. And I thought, this is so cool. So
yeah, I don't even know that it's evil. I mean, I feel like one of the tenets of folk horror is that some of this stuff, some of this mythology, it's beyond what Christians or the regular kind of religion would classify as good or evil. It's just this thing that has this ability to do this for these people, and it does, and this is what it costs. So
at a price,
it's kind of amoral in a way, even though once it translates to what they do, it's not, but yeah, I really liked Jug Face, and I didn't really like Children. Again, the only effect in Children of the Corn that I was like, I would be curious to see how they did it, was with the way that the ground like rolls, like there's some gigantic thing in the ground coming. That was kind of cool. But other than that, man, I don't know. It felt real flat. It's very dated and not in a good way. So, yeah, but okay. Well, we will cut, but we'll be back soon with another episode of either Horror Vision or Sticks and Stones, or both. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe we'll cross the stream.
But yeah.
So, all right. I'm Shawn.
I'm Ray.
And smell you later.
Bye.